Week 6 kicks off with the walking wounded in the Pacific Northwest between the Niners and Seahawks, just who had enough guns to outlast their opponent. There's a big showdown in Dallas this week. The Cowboys got away with one in Pittsburgh, but maybe that Lions offense will tear up that defense quite a bit. And of course, the MVP hosts the probable rookie of the year, just who will be more explosive in a showdown between the MVP Lamar Jackson and Jayden Daniels. Sunday Scaries with McGee starts right now. Welcome in, everyone, to a Thursday post game. Bucs McGee is sidelined by Hurricane Milton. Everything is okay, but the electricity and, of course, internet dependent on that has forced a backup in. We welcome again to the show, I guess, playing backup, Greg from the Breaking It Downs podcast. Greg, how are you? I see you're getting ready to take in a game back there.
Yes, we have this beautiful new stadium renovation that took all of an Amazon order and posting on our wall, but it looks pretty cool, doesn't it?
Yeah,
It's like Friday Night Lights. I give my wife Julie credit. She had a great purchase, so that's like our new studio. It actually looks like we're on the field. Fantastic.
Yeah. And with my condensed view, it looks like
like in the press box.
Yeah. So
Pretty
I
cool.
want to start. Yeah, so I want to start off with this Thursday game. To me, this is interesting because the Niners have struggled this year because of injuries, and I often question whether now a couple weeks ago they were really hurting with a lot of injuries, but since then the only one that's still kind of hurt is McCaffrey. So you'd think they'd be able to figure it out with still having Ayuk and Debo and Kittle and of course Purdy, but that really hasn't been the case. And then the Seahawks got off to a blistering start, 3-0 out the gate, and then their defense kind of got some holes in them. So going into this one, I'm kind of like, all right, like who's actually got enough horses left on the field to withstand their opponent?
Yeah, well, the number one thing that sticks out to me is, so I think San Fran, you probably agree with me, they have to tread water right now. They're severely banged up on both sides. They didn't want to drop to 2-4, get back to 500. I think they'll be fine in the second half of the year. The more perplexing thing to me is Seattle, though. I know Seattle's had some injuries in the D as well, but they've been gashed the last 3 weeks. I mean, that's now, I look back, Detroit in the last 3 weeks, they were 3-0, gave up, I think, 42, 29, and what was tonight, 36, basically almost 100 points in 3 games. I mean, that's horrific. And I'll speak to my G-Men last week because it is very relevant here, which I will give them a shout out, obviously. But on a serious note, Neighbors was out, Singletary was out. We basically, our third string running back, Tracy, who's a rookie who has some promise, but he had 129 yards rushing against them, which actually led the league in the NFL, which is scary to me. So, you're giving up that many yards on the ground to the third string running back of the Giants, whose rushing attack has, as we well know, has not been prolific. Even with Barkley, the line's improved, but you get the point. And then tonight, another 200-plus yards when they still had a shot. Garendo runs however long that run was, 80, 90 yards, whatever it was, down to the 5. So to me, it's like Seattle's in some trouble here. If they don't figure this D out, the Niners just have to hold serve. Seattle they're leaking bad right now.
Hold serve, especially considering that it was looking rough the way it was going with Seattle pulling ahead in the division. Now they're back to 500. San Francisco's back to 500. Arizona has their moments, and the Rams are probably the one team banged up more than both of them. So the fact that 500 makes them actually feeling good, despite how poorly they've played in McCaffrey's absence, doesn't look quite as bad as it probably should.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, for them to be 3-3 now, technically they'd be ahead of Seattle because of the head-to-head. Well, what is crazy, you brought up Arizona, because Arizona came back against San Fran last week. They could actually be in a three-way tie, but regardless, Arizona's not going to challenge San Fran. I think the real challenge once the Rams got hurt, as you alluded to, that takes the Rams out of division contention. You know, they're just too banged up. They might get better as the year, but Seattle was the real threat. And now, I mean, San Fran's in a great spot. I mean, I would think they're the hands-on favorite at this point to win the division, even if they didn't get McCaffrey back, which we assume at some point they will, and they'll get a lot of their other players back on the DM. So, yeah, they're in great shape.
What's your gut feeling as far as when they probably will bring McCaffrey back? Do you think they should rush him, or do you think they're keeping their heads above water enough that they can be a little more cautious and give him a couple extra weeks? Or do you think they're really skating on thin ice enough where they got to be like, okay, as soon as he's ready to go, you're back in the lineup?
I think they have to be cautious. I mean, listen, I'm not the German doctor here, but, you know, as we heard, he went out to Germany to a specialist to see, you know, now you're hearing he's got Achilles issues in both legs. I mean, listen, you know, they're even from a financial standpoint, they've invested a lot of guaranteed money in McCaffrey. And if they have any chance at winning the Super Bowl or getting there again, they're going to have him. So, I mean, I think it's twofold. I think you have to be cautious with him. And on the flip side, if there was any danger to rush him back, tonight definitely helped that cause, right? I mean, because now, and Mason's been good in his absence. I know he's not the same receiver, especially it changes their offense, but you have to get him, in my opinion. If it's another 5-6 weeks, even longer, they're in a great spot. I think you make sure he's as close to 100% healthy as could be. They're going to win this division without.
Well, fortunately for them, not as much the guaranteed money invested as the Browns did in Deshaun Watson.
Like I actually said on our podcast, and then we were joking about it because I gave the Browns the paper bag. I give out a weekly paper bag, and Browns have earned it. But we did. I mean, that is literally shaping up to be arguably one of the worst moves in NFL history. I mean, he had the most guaranteed money at the time. I'm not sure if it's still the case, but he hasn't thrown for 200 yards yet in a game. And, you know, they've had a lot of injuries on the offensive line and all that, but, I mean, he looks terrible. They look terrible. That is a complete mess in Cleveland. Like, I'm not exaggerating when I say this could really shape up to be one of the worst moves in the history of the league. Remember the Herschel, I'm aging myself a little, but the Herschel Walker move when basically Minnesota traded, they made the Cowboys. They trade all the first-round picks. That got Emmitt Smith, Aikman, Irvin. That's literally what rebuilt the Cowboys. This is on that level of that, Ricky Williams, all of that. It was terrible.
Oh, I remember the Ricky Williams.
Yeah, when Ditka traded his whole draft for, yeah. But yeah, I don't. I mean, it's been a couple of years now, and you're still hearing this mess about more assault stories. I mean, it's a black eye from a PR perspective on the field. He would have already been. I'm convinced he would have already been benched right now. But to save face, it's the money invested in him. They'd be better with Jameis Winston behind center, under center right now. I have no doubt about that. But it's a mess.
Yeah, Bucs McGee and I were going over that last week. I mean, if it's not time now, it's never going to be time.
And I'm not saying it's all his fault, but you have to. I just quickly use the Chiefs. I mean, look how many guys they lost. And I'm not saying he needs to be 5-0, but you see what Mahomes does, and so you can't be this bad. I mean, not to have 200 yards passing in a game this year yet, that's bad. They're in some trouble.
Yeah. Before we move on to the next game, one I'm sure you're going to have plenty of hot opinions on. What would you handicap the odds for the Niners to finish this off and kind of end where they're supposed to end with winning the division?
I mean, I at this point would put that legit at 90+%. I mean, barring, I mean, they already have a spate of injuries. Barring a significant injury to Purdy, maybe that would be possibly the only thing to derail that. But they're so talented on both sides of the ball. I mean, this was a huge, huge win for them. I find it hard to believe. And again, I feel like Seattle should be better, but that defense has serious issues. And this is 3 weeks in a row, just obliterated. So I find it hard to believe. Pretty much Niners have had worst case already injury wise they're still technically tied for first.
Yeah, and not just huge from a standings perspective, but also from a confidence boost perspective as well. With the losses the Niners have taken to Arizona and
yeah, and
Minnesota,
I think
Minnesota before we really knew what Minnesota was about.
I think San Fran. I put similar like the Chiefs last year. Certain teams that are that established, like the Chiefs, actually they hadn't won. The old stat going to last year, they hadn't won a playoff game on the road, et cetera, et cetera. The Niners are similar to Chiefs last year. They're not playing for. They're going to hurt themselves for the 1 seed or this or that, right? They're playing for the end game. They're playing to win the Super Bowl. So you get what I'm saying, that not every game being 3-3 right now to them is so be it. They just have to get in, be healthy when they get in, and they're as good as anyone to make another run.
So moving into Sunday's action, a team that often does not hold the fondest warm places in your heart, the Dallas Cowboys host the Lions. And to me, the Cowboys got away with one last week. I don't know whether it kind of screwed up Pittsburgh with starting late because of the weather delay, but I looked at that game thinking Pittsburgh's going to tear up this defense, especially coming off a loss.
I did as well.
And
I did as well. Not even because I hate Dallas. I agree.
Yeah, and if they somehow survive that, they got out of there. And doubling down on the fact that they're so horrible at home in AT&T Stadium, I don't see any reason how Detroit doesn't hang a crooked number up on them, even if it's a shootout and not necessarily an embarrassing performance.
Yeah, I can't disagree. And listen, I'll give Dak a lot of credit and the Cowboys. I mean, that was a game I did not think they were going to win. I mean, they're missing DeMarcus Lawrence, Micah Parsons. The only thing in retrospect, looking back, I mean, Pittsburgh, wants to stick to their kind of ground and pound game plan. I feel like they could have opened it up a bit more versus Dallas. And I think that they kept the game close, gave Dallas a shot to win, which they did. Credit to them. But I do think Detroit coming off the bye, all the weapons, Detroit has arguably the best offensive line in the league. You're going to take Dallas's pass rushers out. I'm with you. I think Detroit puts a hurt on. I mean, you can tread water for a week with injuries like that. In the long term, how long can you do that? I don't see how they stop Detroit. Detroit, I actually picked them to go to the Super Bowl this year. I think it's a bad matchup for Dallas right now without those two pieces.
They're coming off of a bye. But in that Seattle game where they kind of really got their offense going, was that enough of what to see out of Detroit to make you think, okay, they're back, they're awakened now, they shook off whatever rust they had from the first few games?
Well, to me, the key coming into the year for them, they were going to be good regardless. But this was the year, people forget about Jamison Williams.
Yeah,
Jamison Williams, and in that game, he busted. I think it was a 70-plus yard touchdown. Detroit was running the ball. Well, you pick your poison against them. They have two great running backs. If you commit to the run, then you have Jamison blow the doors off you up top. That's what Detroit offers. They have so many weapons. They can do it so many different ways. They're going to be a problem for everybody, and especially I think Dallas doesn't have a pass rush this week. So Detroit's just loaded with weapons. That's flat out. And they can protect Goff. If Goff is decent, doesn't need to be great. He played, I would say, shoddy the first few weeks. Then he basically threw a perfect game, what they said, and Campbell forgot it that week. We didn't give him a game ball. But point being, he just needs to be good, not great. They're loaded with weapons.
Yeah, I'm a little miffed that due to my local market, for some reason the Panthers are playing at 425. So it's the one time I'm gonna get shut out of the Cowboys.
That's right, the Cowboy Lion game. That's a late game, correct?
Yeah.
But is that I haven't looked at the national schedule. Is that the national game though?
How can it not be? I'm sure it is.
Because I know when I deal in our market here, we'll get the national game. You know what? I'm not sure about who knows the black. They change that stuff all the time.
So, yeah.
Are you saying the Falcons Panthers won't be as exciting as the Cowboys Lions?
I'll be shocked if it's exciting past 5 minutes into the first quarter.
Well, listen, Carolina's run game looked better under Dalton. I mean, you can say that.
Well, and the fact that Atlanta is a walking head case.
Yeah, they're very mercurial. I mean, obviously, based off last week, it looked like the offense kicked into gear. But I don't necessarily know if that keeps up this week. I think Carolina may keep it interesting, but we'll see.
I would side on the devil's advocate on that one only because you cannot trust Atlanta farther than you could throw Kirk Cousins like a bag of dirt.
Yeah, and I mean they're still figuring things out too. So but obviously based off last week. But as I think the theme in the NFL, if you think I mean we're just talking about Seattle's 3-0 looks great, has a shot. San Fran's banged up. We're 3 weeks later. They're technically not even first place anymore. 3 straight. So yeah, nothing shocks me. Week to week league for certain.
Yeah. Put your Giants bias aside and pick the 3 things that need to break right for the Cowboys, not only in this game but also as the season progresses, because the deficiencies we've seen from the Cowboys have been the deficiencies for the entire season. they're very consistent, albeit in a bad way.
So you're asking me to talk about how Dallas could do well?
Yes.
Well, if they lost my definition would be if they lost every game the rest of the year, that would be great. But I don't think that's what you're looking for. So.
That's right.
Well, to talk of the positives, so I will say this: Dowdle, the running back, I think you saw the last few weeks they've committed more time. I'm not saying, but Zeke is a situational back nowadays. They have to put that in Dowdle. They're going to need to have a run game because early in the season, especially, too much pressure on Dak. We saw in the playoff game last year. If you I think any team in the NFL look at across years and years. You know how many guys have thrown 500 yards in a game and lost? It's actually more than you think. They can't drop back a million times, throw the ball all the time. They need to establish a run game. They obviously need to get healthy on the defensive end. And honestly, I mean, I think their secondary receivers, I mean, Brandon Cooks is out. They played well. Turpin played well. They're going to need some other guys other than Lamb because if Lamb draws double coverage, they have to be more team-oriented, not just a fantasy, Dak to Lamb. They need to be well-balanced because you can that's harder to D against. So I think if they find a healthy balance, D will get healthier. I mean, that Dak still is much I hate Dallas, very good quarterback. I think they should be in the mix. And division-wise, I mean, they're going to have to find a way to slow down Washington as well, as much as I hate that point as well. But, yeah. But on a serious note, you can't fall too far behind either, right? So, Philly, I didn't think my Giants played them well. But I think the key for Dallas is to find a healthy balance. And once again, it's rely more on the run game, play more of a not throw the ball around the yard 50 times and wait for interceptions and picks and injuries, and you get it. So find balance is the key, I think, for Dallas. And that run game with Dowdle is the key.
Balance has been an awful thing for them to find because Rico Dowdle was supposed to be a very promising running back, and he looks hardly used.
Well, he's put up some decent numbers the last few weeks, and I think if they're going to make a run of any sort, that has to happen. They cannot drop. Again, I'm not cutting on Zeke. He's a situational back at this point, but you're not dropping back 50 times a year. And although their line is still decent, it's not the old line from the Aikman days, even the last 10 years. They've had some new pieces. They need to find balance. So that to me is the key to the Cowboys. I hope they don't.
Yeah. We often cut on their decision to make Zeke their prized off-season acquisition.
Well, I'm sure you've heard too. And none of us know the truth, but they're taking a lot of flack for not going after Derrick Henry, who would have been a great fit. Mm-hmm. And then I think Jones said, "Oh, we didn't have the money," or which in the NFL you can find ways if you want to bet off. And I'm not saying any of us expected Henry to do this well already. I mean, he looks like he's 10 years ago, outrunning D-backs still. But
once they finally started feeding him the ball.
but I will say, even myself, I didn't think he was washed up. I thought in that offense, it's a perfect fit because you have to basically take into account Lamar, rolling out, so it's multifaceted. But even myself, I mean, he's had some runs where he's literally outrun the defensive backs. And I know every guy says, "Oh, I'm in the best shape of my life." He definitely is putting the work because he looks like he has an extra step this year for certain, no doubt. So yeah, they could have used him, but that's why I think Dowdle on that running game will be key to Dallas.
Well, we've segued both teams in our next topic a couple times. One is those Ravens. They've been much to this newfound reliability on pouring the ball into Henry, have kind of reclaimed their status as a potential Super Bowl contender. And Washington, much surprisingly, and probably to your own chagrin as a Giants fan, has been incredibly hot this season, and Jayden Daniels has looked head and shoulders above where a rookie quarterback should be. Been absolutely electric. Last week he had a little bit of growing pains, but still put up solid all around numbers. Going into last week, his completion percentage of the season was over 80%. So he's been an extremely accurate rookie quarterback, not just an explosive runner. So I mean, something's got to give in this one. And one of Bucks McGee's hinges this year has been how porous the Baltimore defense looks, and not as good as years past what we're used to seeing from that team and that unit. So, do you see this as something where they're gonna have trouble with Jayden Daniels and he's gonna have success and light them up a little bit, or is this gonna be punch for punch, Jayden down, Lamar down, Jayden down, Lamar down?
I think he has a point. I mean, Baltimore's D even last week, I mean, gave up a bundle to Cincy. The game in Dallas, they had a huge lead. They gave up. So their defense has not been up to par. I would expect at some point that to improve, but I don't necessarily think they walk in Sunday and all of a sudden pitch a shutout against Daniels and Washington. I don't see that. I think that is an issue right now. Punch for punch. I mean, I do think this is where I put it this way. I think Daniels will be forced into a different position, like in the Tampa game when they got rolled. I think that was opening week.
Yeah.
Much easier to play from ahead, and especially when a player like Daniels, that's a nightmare trying to guard him. But I think Washington's D is still an issue. I think they're lower half. Matter of fact, when I was making fun of Deshaun Watson, Washington was the worst third down defense in the league. And I think Cleveland went something like 1 for 13 against them on third down. That's not going to happen with Baltimore. So point being, I think the game script will get Washington out of sorts. I think Daniels will make a share of plays, and they will put some points on. I don't think Baltimore figures this out in a week, but I think that I don't see them being able to slow down Baltimore on that end. And Baltimore, when you can feast on a pass rush, I'm assuming they have a lead in that game. But I expected Daniels to make plays, though. There's no doubt about it. I don't think Baltimore shores it up. But they'll win.
Just extra salt in the wound there for Cleveland fans to be so awful on third down.
I actually got a good buddy, Brian.
That's horrible on third down.
Yeah, I was talking to him, and he's down definitely in the dumps. Yeah. But in reality, so Washington's D. I think they're going to get it exposed this week. I think. But yeah, Daniels is not getting shut out either, though. Baltimore's got some work to do.
To the point where the lock of the week might be to take the over in this one.
I mean, it's hard to think there's this defensive struggle coming, but as we said, I didn't see the number, but I don't think this is a 15-10 Pats Dolphins game. Put it that way.
Pats Dolphins.
Yeah, pretty.
Talk about embarrassments. Talk about embarrassments from last week.
So I definitely think it'll be one of the more entertaining games on the slate. Let's put it that way.
What are the strengths as far as Washington this year, as far as what Daniel's been able to do with that offense, and do those translate well against the deficiencies that Baltimore's had on defense?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that harken back to the Monday night against Cincinnati, Daniels threw 2 deep balls that were incredible. I mean, 50-plus yards in the air, dropped perfectly into McLaurin's hands. I mean, the stuff he was doing at LSU, you just don't usually see that translate the next year in the NFL. I saw a stat, and I don't have it in front of me. It was after week 3 or week 4 that Baltimore had actually allowed the most pass plays of over 20 yards in the entire league, which is startling considering their defense the last few years. So, I mean, that right off the bat, that's would tell you that'll be an issue. I think they will be able to complete a couple deep ones against, and that's where Daniels is such a problem, is that, okay, well, if you commit, even if you roll 2 high safeties and you try to take that away, Daniel's scrambling ability. So he presents a lot of problems. There's no doubt. Like I said, he's going to be a problem for everybody. But I do think the way Baltimore, and you saw Burrow, he kind of lit up the Baltimore defense. Chase had almost 200 yards. It's an issue. I would expect Daniels to have another good day. So pick your poison.
For Baltimore's keys to success, is it just as simple as keep giving it to Henry because he's the hot hand, or do you think that this is the week we start to see Lamar look like the MVP Lamar again? Because he's been rather pedestrian so far this year.
You know what? I'll go to the same thing I just said about Dallas. Play to their strengths right now in this game. They don't. I'm not saying they can't beat Washington in an up and down game, but they don't need to. Have some balance. Washington, even my Giants, went up and down the field, and their defense is not great. So stay balanced, and I think the key to that is commit to the run game. There'll be big plays available, when they commit more to the box. So Baltimore, just stay to their game plan. Stay physical, run the ball. They'll have some big hitters in the main. I think just play their game, and they'll expose Washington's defense. They don't. Again, they don't need a shootout. Lamar doesn't need to do that. No.
Can you help me figure out why the tight ends in Baltimore are such a struggle this season? Between Andrews and Likely, you got two talented tight ends, and neither one of them seen, other than the week one against the Chiefs when Likely went off. Since then, neither one of them has really been a success for the team. And I don't know whether it's just because Lamar's not looking at them or something else.
Well, what's funny is last week, and I'm forgetting, it's Kovar. Is that the third tight end? I'm forgetting off the top of my head. He had some big plays.
Kozar, something like that.
It's Bernie Kosar. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, Bernie Kosar. Yes.
I'm looking this up as we speak. No, but he had some big plays. But I think, you know what, honestly, I think where people are complaining from a fantasy perspective, this is a great thing for Baltimore because no matter how talented players are, if you know the ball's going there, you'll cater your defense that way. When Baltimore's able to, and I'm looking right now because I want to see. He actually did. I remember he had Charlie Kolar, 3 catches for 64 yards and a touchdown. So you had 10 catches out of 3 different tight ends for well over 100 yards. Actually, well over 100 yards and a couple touchdowns. What does it tell you? For a defense, that's hard to guard against. If you have not only 2 of them, but 3 of them. So, like I said, I hear people, oh my gosh, the same as you said. What do we do with the tight end? For Baltimore, This is a good problem to have, right? Because some tight ends on some teams go into games, the defense knows they're probably in there for a run play. They're rolling out 3 right now who can make plays in the passing game. So that's a great problem to have. Put it that way. Fantasy owners to their chagrin, but not to Baltimore. That's a good problem.
And it's easy to say that Washington is certainly ahead of schedule right now, much like Houston was last year. Well, of course, Washington does not have, as to your previous point, does not have nearly as good a defense as Houston did last year, but they're still ahead of schedule. What do you think that Daniels is making the best of his weapons, or do you think there's actually explosive options on that team that maybe people overlooked?
No, I mean, yes, he is making. Obviously, he's making the difference. But listen, McLaurin's a stud receiver. I mean, he has been. His numbers were a little bit down the last year or 2, but that's as much shoddy quarterback play, the offense not being on the field. So McLaurin's a legit stud receiver. Their running backs. I always thought Brian Robinson was underrated. I mean, he's become a factor. And Eckler, who was out with concussion. I mean, don't forget Eckler. 2 years ago, we're talking about fantasy. Was he not the top scoring or one of the top 5? So I mean, they have legit 2 guys in the backfield. So yeah, I mean he has some weapons. He's definitely the chef, cooking up all the ingredients. But yes, he legit has weapons. He's a problem. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, Eckler tanked a couple of my fantasy teams last year. I'm
still
experiencing some post-traumatic for that.
I was on the same boat, and like anyone, especially running back injuries, kind of. But the point is, he doesn't have to be the bell cow here. There's 2 of them, so him and Robinson. So it's a good problem to have. And even the Giants, who, looking at Washington's game, I'm using it because I watched that whole game. They didn't do a terrible job against Daniels, but because they were committing, the run game hurt us. So that's what Washington has. Like we were talking about balance, even they need it, and they've definitely got that with the 2 running backs. They can catch balls out of the backfield as well. So their offense, I don't think they're going 15-2 here, but I'm also not naive enough to think they're a problem. There's no doubt about it. That offense is a problem for the rest of the league.
So we're gonna head into the South now, and it's always fun to talk to Bucks McGee about the Saints because he has the ire for them as you do with the Cowboys and everyone else in the NFC East. So this is an interesting one because New Orleans is coming off a Monday where the Chiefs kind of exposed them probably a lot more than they were expecting. And to add insult to injury, or I guess injury to insult, as the case may be, Derek Carr is out of the game and will not play. Go Cox, for former South Carolina
Yeah.
Gamecock Spencer Rattler will get the start, and he didn't look um that terrible in preseason. And I was someone that would catch a few Gamecocks games down here, and I would think like, I could see where the talent's there, but he doesn't really work for college. But in the NFL, he could probably be more successful. So I'm almost kind of thinking that if they have the right game plan, because we saw how Atlanta was able to expose Tampa over the middle, if they have the right game plan, maybe the Saints can, especially at home, can give Tampa a little bit of a challenge here.
Yeah, well, start over Rattler, right? So interesting story to him. He was legit a top 5 quarterback coming into college. He went to Oklahoma. He was on some list considered a Heisman favorite when he went to Oklahoma. Things just didn't pan out there. So transferred to South Carolina, did a decent job there. Team wasn't great. He's got talent. That's never been in doubt. You know what? I got to look at the Saints this way though. Sometimes, and I try to remind myself. I think they're 3-3 now. Correct? They were 3-0. Now lost 3 in a row.
Mm-hmm.
They
Yeah.
easily could be 5-1. Let's game against the Eagles. They had one blown coverage against Dallas Goedert, lost in the final seconds. Atlanta, Koo kicks a 50. It seems like every kicker nowadays is kicking a 58-yard field goal, but it was I think 55 plus to beat them at the buzzer. So let me start off. New Orleans could have very well been 5-0. I'm going to give credit to KC because the thing people forget about all the time with the Chiefs is obviously Mahomes. I don't even think it's a question. He's the best quarterback in the league. Their defense is excellent. Their defense shut down New Orleans Monday before Carr got hurt. So I don't, I try not to overreact. I don't think New Orleans is completely done either. So I don't, New Orleans still has weapons. You still have Kamara. You can run the ball. I don't think it's out of the question New Orleans stays afloat for a while Carr's out and could actually get a win or two to keep their season. So I'm not ready to bury them. And you see what I mean? Like if there's a couple plays difference, they're 5-1, and we're just talking, they lost to the Chiefs. So I'm not burying the Saints. And yes, Rattler again does have talent. That's never been a question.
Kamara is an interesting one to me because when Breeze left, his production went significantly down, and that part of it I know was injury, and part of it was that suspension he had to deal with. But he's really rebounded himself back to being a respectable back in the league, whereas I didn't think he would get back to that. Just
I think it's
because his production was so elevated above where his game was. He was almost like a better Reggie Bush, and his production was just so far up there because of Breeze.
I think it's twofold. I think number one, especially out of a running back, it's health. There's no doubt about it. He was playing banged up most of last year. That's first and foremost. Yeah, I think. I mean, listen, they brought in. I think it's Clint Kubiak as the offense coordinator. They needed to revamp that offense. Anytime I watched the Saints last year in games you thought they were going to win, their offense just was, as like middle of the road as could be. Play calling, all of it, like nothing inspiring. So I think you get health, you get a new offensive coordinator, breathe some life into the offense, and I think there you go. I think he's still a factor. And listen, you still have two excellent liners, Olave, obviously, and Shaheed on the outside. He got the big touchdown against the Chiefs. He offers something in any game, and you put Rattler, put any quarterback, you can throw the ball 50 yards in the air or something close to it. He's probably going to beat most defenders 50 yards down the field. So they still have weapons. I don't think this is fait accompli for them. I think the Saints are still a relevant factor, put it that way.
And is that because is that in spite of the fact that they do not have a lot of they do not have a lot of flexibility year to year because of their cap situation, and also their defense has a lot of age on it. Do you think that their window is kind of a ticking time bomb, or or is this team kind of a bit of a misnomer as far as how good their longevity can be?
I think they're kind of in the middle because they've tried to inject some youth in. The question will be, as most teams, the margins in the NFL are very small. It comes down to quarterback, and Derek Carr, who's never been terrible. I think he took too much heat in Oakland, Vegas, wherever the heck they've been playing. But would you say he's middle of the road over his career? Yeah, which isn't terrible, but it's not going to lead you to Super Bowl. So I think the health, the play of Carr, and if Carr, I think he's kind of on the hot seat here this year. If he does not play well when he comes back, and who knows, bleak injury, those things can last. That's one of those that he might feel good in 2 weeks and make one movement, he's out another 4. I think it'll come down to quarterback play for them, so that will determine their window. And I guess what we're talking about, Rattler again, the kid's had talent. He was a top prospect coming out of high school. That's never been in question. Maybe I don't have the numbers in front of me, but think how many quarterbacks nowadays, good quarterbacks in the league, were not top 10 picks, right? There's more busts in the first round. Do I think it's feasible that, under Kubiak, taught the right way, could Rattler possibly become the answer down the road? Maybe so, right? So I think QB will determine there. And again, I know it sounds simple, but I do think the Saints are good enough with a good QB to be a factor. But yeah, they're not overwhelming like the Niners that you can win with a million people going down.
And as far as Rattler's welcome to the NFL, a defensive opponent is concerned, with Tampa, we've seen a kind of an inconsistent defensive effort so far this season, where they've looked good in some games, but then their middle absolutely gets exposed versus Atlanta. Cousins puts up 500 some yards, and then that Denver game, which was just completely out of the blue. So what's kind of the baseline for the Tampa defense, and are they a unit that can give the Saints fits, especially with a rookie quarterback?
Well, this is a recurring theme we've talked about many times. It's health. Antoine Winfield is a huge piece, obviously, in that secondary. He might be back. I think he's practicing this week. So they've been severely banged up defensively. That's why I was so impressed when they won that game. I think it was in Detroit early in the year. And they did give up a lot, but Mayfield's been excellent. So I think Tampa's got to get healthy first and foremost on the D side. For the Saints, listen, I think you have to. I don't want to say keep it simple, but they can't have Rattler throwing the ball 40 times on Sunday, right? So yes, Tampa's got some issues in the secondary in particular, injury-wise, but I think you need to rely more on Kamara, play a smart game plan, limit the time of possession for Baker, because say what you want, Baker's been excellent. That offense has put up a lot of points. I think they're legit. Baker's turned that corner. I think they need to keep them off the field. So yes, there is some areas to exploit on Tampa, but that's where, if Carr was here, I'd feel better about it. With Rattler, TBD, right?
Yeah.
So don't put too much on his plate. There'll be plays to be made, but again, I think they're going to have to rely on the run game. So I don't know if they can really exploit with Rattler the biggest deficiencies Tampa has right now, but they should be able to move the ball some, though. Avoid the turnovers. They'll have a shot.
Yeah. Baker's resurgence has really been a nice feel good story the last couple of years with Tampa, because he's someone that Cleveland ruined, much like the Browns and the Jets seem to be the two franchises that ruin quarterbacks. And and um, Baker went through that as well. He bounced around to a couple teams. He lands at Tampa, and then all of a sudden, with this bevy of options between Evans, Godwin, this Palmer kid who he seems to like throwing to, the running game's a little iffy, but
I do
at
think Bucky
least that
Irving,
they're
though. He had a big fumble in the game against Atlanta, unfortunately. But I do think Bucky Irving from Oregon, the rookie, I think he has some home run potential. He could be a big factor for them going forward.
Yeah, and so where should Baker put his attention to as far as who to focus on? Should it be the big guns on the outside? Should it be Godwin over the middle? Should it be maybe a more mixed in the run game? and the tight ends who haven't really had a significant part this year. It's like, well, where should Baker go to kind of take advantage of New Orleans defense?
I think, and I keep saying this, and I'm not trying to be simple with this, but it bounces well. That Baker got in trouble early in his career, and not to digress for a second, but you see a lot of these quarterbacks. You take 90% of them, you put these young kids with a bad offensive game plan, 3 different coordinators, et cetera, et cetera. You can take almost the best of any quarterback. They're not going to be good, right? So a lot of these quarterbacks, and we're seeing more and more of that. Let me add one question here, just to who right now do you know has the highest passer rating in the league right now? Just to go to show you like how experience and all that helps. It's only been a few weeks.
Sam Darnold?
That'd be Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco.
Oh, stop.
But
Oh,
here's
God.
the point. Sam Darnold as well. The point being is a lot of these kids, that's it. You need them in a consistent game plan. You have different method. So I think Baker's found a good spot. Again, he's always had talent. His poise has grown. So I think Baker just something I feel like he's gotten a lot better at too. Did you watch the Atlanta game Thursday, which was surprisingly probably the best game of the year I've seen? Baker made a couple plays in the past that he would have rushed a throw. He would have, when he saw room in the pocket, he saw, what the defense dropped back. He took off for a 9-yard gain, for a 6-yard gain. He's managing the game as well now. So he's playing the role of a quarterback, not just a slinger. If you know what I mean? I don't use the Brady. I can't deal with Brady. Don't get me started. But that's what Brady was best at. He really was. Taking advantage of what the defense gives him. And I think Baker's gotten great at that. And that's the same thing. I mean, they have weapons. The run game is important. I think Baker just needs to do what Baker's doing. And even that, the game against Denver, what we're finding out after 5 weeks is Denver's defense is pretty darn legit. I mean,
and
so
I wasn't expecting that. I thought they got gassed. I thought they got gassed from recent years of free agency, and then of course the Russ contract. I wasn't expecting their defense to be competent at all.
So I think Baker just honestly, I mean, I'm impressed, and I think it's legit. I think Baker just has to, play the game plan. Doesn't have to win it all his own. Godwin seems to have a resurgence right now, so you can't. He was banged up as well. He didn't have as good a year. He looks refreshed. They even have the kid Jalen McMillan they drafted at Washington. He's been out the last few weeks, but they have weapons. So spread the ball around. Just use a quick analogy. Like you saw the Bills offense struggle last few, but like Stephon Diggs is gone. The point is, when you move the ball around, it's harder to D. Like talk about the Ravens, right? So take what the defense gives you, and he's gotten really good at that.
Much to fantasy owners' ire all over. Another team that lives in the ire depths of your heart, the Philadelphia Eagles, coming off a bye, and they play the aforementioned woeful Cleveland Browns. So, do you want to see an Eagles loss, or do you want to see the nail put in the coffin of Deshaun Watson?
Listen, what I want to see, I mean, if the Eagles didn't win a game for the next 32 years, I still wouldn't feel bad, okay? So I do have sympathy for the Brownies, I do. But I cannot see it. It looks like Philly's getting Smith and Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown back this week. I think it's pretty high spread. I think it's a 9-point spread in this game. And I'm not usually a fan, especially NFL, but I don't see how Cleveland stays in this game with Philly. I don't. Philly's had their own issues. I think they still have them, but obviously Barkley's been huge, and there's just nothing Cleveland does well right now. So I would love to see it, and I'll root for it, but I have a feeling this will be over probably by mid-second quarter.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point as far as what Cleveland's actually doing well, because the defense was thought to be the strength going from last year into this year. And aside from that first game where they got lit up against the Cowboys, they've actually held it pretty close with opponents until last week when
it's strange because they have some talent on the squad. Cleveland does, they do, but it's just a mess. And I'm gonna put it that primarily on the offense. I don't care how good your defense is. Your offense goes 3 and out 75% of your drives. They're on the field all day, and I think that's what you're running into. So until Cleveland gets that figured out, and I don't necessarily think they're going to, That's their issue. So, yeah, I don't think Cleveland's defense. I think the numbers are a little misleading. I don't think they're this bad, but they're on the field all the time, and I think that's why I don't see how Cleveland. They've even had decent running with that. Nick Chubb might be back soon, but they've even run the ball okay. Jerome Ford's been decent, but they're just a mess. I mean, they have the look. You saw even the body language, and I'm serious. The Eagles last year. Do you remember towards the end of the year, and then they got walloped in Tampa?
Mm-hmm.
The body language, that's a real thing. And you heard the Eagles talk about it in the offseason. That's what the Browns look like to me right now. So if your locker room is not bought in it, and listen, I don't care who you are, anyone who's played a sport, there's no doubt in my mind that in their locker room, they're talking that that Jameis Winston should be in at quarterback right now. I guarantee it. I'm not saying they hate Deshaun, but you can bet $1 million on that because their offense is terrible right now.
Yeah, and speaking of figuring things out, Philly's had some growing pains as well, and make it make sense because I mean maybe the bye week kind of helped them figure some stuff out. But you brought up Baker before as far as going from coordinator to coordinator, and that's been a subplot to Jalen Hurts the last few years since the Super Bowl run. So is it a matter of Philly? Is it Philly having significant holes and issues that they need to address, or is it just a matter of so much inconsistency with Hurts between all the different coaches?
I'm not one to dump on coaches, but Nick Sirianni, if I was an Eagle fan, it would drive me insane. The inconsistency. No, I mean, do you remember in that game? I'll use the Atlanta game. Okay, they have a fourth down. I think it was fourth and let's call it. They're at the 6-yard line. They're at home. They have a lead.
Is this when he kicked the field goal? When he kicked like the 60-yard field goal?
No. They're inside Atlanta 10. This is early in the game. They have a lead. It's an easy field goal. You're at home. You're not the desperate team. You're the more talented squad at home. They go for it. They don't get it. Mistake number one. It's 3 points. It's 4. They're at the 6. They're not at the half-yard line. Then later in the game, we remember, granted, Barkley dropped the ball. But if they just run the ball 3 times, that game's over. Atlanta has no shot. And that continually is a theme. I'm all for taking chances, but they do it at inopportune times. So I think, honestly, I think their talent is getting by. Sirianni, they have to, the coaching staff has to get their what together. That's bottom line. Because there is a lot of talent there. I'm not saying they're a perfect team. They're not. Their O-line, their D's got some issues. But that weaponry they have with Smith, Brown, Barkley, Goddard, I mean, they have it. So I think it's that, and it seems to be better. But Hurts didn't even hide the fact in the offseason that him and Sirianni had issues. And I think going forward, that's going to be the Eagles. They have talent. There's no doubt about that.
And we got some extra time here. So I know I've tortured you with having to talk about the Cowboys in Washington and Philly. So talk about your Giants on Sunday night. And to me, you know what? I'll clap it up for your boys last week. That was a game you probably shouldn't have won, and you took it to Seattle's chops.
We blasted them, by the way. And if they didn't have that 100-yard return, which I almost lost my mind in the first second of anyway, I don't want to get started. But just so you know, we outplayed them thoroughly.
Oh, in every facet, 100%.
Yes.
I will not take anything away from that. But if that game had played out probably the way the rest of the world thought it would play out, this would be a very daunting game to be in prime time against a Cincinnati team where talented, also very struggling. Like, I wouldn't have thought who outside of those two markets would actually want to watch that. So is this a game where the Giants can kind of repeat the magic of that Seattle game? Or is Cincinnati going to figure out how to deal with their porous defense and let the offense work against the Giants?
Well, it's not even patting my Giants. I think it's the formula the Giants are playing. So if I asked you right now, and I bet nobody would get this if you hadn't heard, do you know which team leads the NFL in sacks right now?
I'm sure the way you set that up, it's the Giants.
It's the Giants. So start right there, okay? 22 sacks. Dexter Lawrence inside is playing like Reggie White right now. Okay, he's a monster. And I don't care what level of football. I don't care if it's high school, pee-wee, college, pros. When you're good up front, and the Giants' D-line is that. They have Burns. They have Thibodeau. They're legit up there. You start with that, you can win any game. That's been number one, especially that Seattle game. That was not a fluke. They dominated the line of scrimmage from that side. So that is legit. I think the Giants, obviously neighbors who we don't know if he's going to play again. I think the Giants, this is their formula right now. Danny Dimes has been actually pretty good. Again, I'm not saying he's Mahomes. They don't need him to be. I think if they play to their strengths, find a balance. They ran the ball better last week. Tracy, the running back. I think it's legit as far as they can be competitive. The only issue I would say right here, like Cincinnati's issues are completely on the defensive end. They've been horrible. Remember the Washington game? Legit didn't force a turnover or a punt the whole game. New England, week 1, who their offense has been abysmal. Since he knew New England was running the ball all day, that's all they did. They kept running it down their throats. The Cincy D has been horrendous, okay? So that is going to be an issue. I don't think they all of a sudden turn that. Joe Burrow minus the pick late in the game. What do you have, 5 touchdowns Sunday? They still lost. That's their issue. Their offense.
Yeah, who loses when your quarterback has 5 touchdown passes?
That's my point. So do I think Cincy's all of a sudden going to be the 85 Bears on Sunday night? No, I don't. I will say the Giants issue defensively, their secondary has been banged up, and that would be kind of the weak point. They have a couple of young kids who are playing well, but I'm not saying I'm a Giant fan. If the Giants can, slow down, contain Chase and Higgins, and not give up 40 in that passing game, I think they'll have a shot to win this game. I do. But, the Cincy's defensive issues, there's a reason they're 1-4. That's not a fluke, right?
Yeah. Hang tight and be opportunistic.
Yeah, that's it. You can stay on the field against that defense. Listen, the Giants' bugaboo and primetime games, especially if they play well, is bad turnovers, this and that. If they can avoid that, seriously, if they can avoid that, Danny Dimes over the last 3 weeks, the only turnover he has was on a Hail Mary at the end of the game. He has to throw the ball in the air. They don't turn the ball over.
Yeah,
there's no reason they can't stay in and beat Cincy. I understand Cincy's got the weaponry, but again, it's not fantasy football. If the Giants can get to Burrow and the Cincy, another part of that, Cincy offensive line's not been great at all.
No. The only thing that's worked out well for them is Burrow and Chase, and even that took a couple weeks to get going.
Yeah, and Higgins is back, which helps, no doubt. And, I don't expect the Giants to shut down their passing attack, but if they don't get completely gouged, I honestly think the Giants can win this game. I do.
And real quick before we start to wrap up, just touch on the London game real quick. Last week, of course, the Jets had Aaron Rodgers looked like he didn't have much left in the arm. Minnesota, the Jets defense played well enough to keep them contained, but the Jets couldn't close that one out. So now the unofficial London NFL franchise, the Jags, head back overseas to the Bears. What do you make of Caleb Williams? Is he so inconsistent? He's just this bad, or is there actually a little bit misleading because their offensive line is utter trash?
Yeah, no, I mean we're talking about Caleb here.
Yeah,
I think listen. It's his first year. I mean, I'm expecting him to throw 4,500 yards. I think he's doing fine, quite frankly. He had what was it, last week, 2 weeks ago, at 300 yards. They blasted. It was Carolina last week, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, their offense seems to have improved the last few weeks, which that's what you expect out of any offense, especially a rookie quarterback. So I haven't seen anything at Caleb Williams other than just need to learn the position. And, that's the Houston game they lost. He must have been hit 75 times. Legit. So I think Caleb's fine. He's going to make mistakes. I think they're fine. I think Caleb Williams is on an upward slope, per se. And the way Jacksonville's defense has played, my Lord. So I would expect them to have. They should be better, but you're a Colts fan.
The fact that they gave up 350 yards to Joe Flacco, who has nothing left in his arm, is embarrassing.
Listen, Flacco's still. Listen, don't forget, Flacco played well, and I'm not cutting on Flacco here, but they gave up a 14-point lead in the fourth quarter. No Jonathan Taylor, Alec Pierce. I think he just burnt them again while we're on air. No, they're horrible. I mean, the Buffalo game on the Monday night, they are absolutely horrendous at home with a lead. So I don't. Yeah, you know what? I know Trevor Lawrence has been taking the heat. He had a good game. They're a mess. I mean, Peterson's a mess. The defense is a mess. I would expect Cal to put up some decent numbers against the Jags this week.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying
I,
that, I think the Jags could do some things on the other end, but seriously, like even in a win, and you probably watched, it was ridiculous. Like, how are you getting burnt deep twice when you're up 14 in the fourth quarter? It makes no sense. Well, to the Jags, it does.
I think we could suit up and do a better job defending them.
Yeah, but I mean, and I know Pierce can fly, but you get the point. Just keep your safeties high. Make those drives drag on. They almost lost the game. It's like, what is going on over there? So
Yeah.
So I think it's an opportunity for, again, they have looked better, but Roma Dunze, and I don't mean he's played poorly, just he's a rookie as well. I think it's a good week for the Dunze to kind of get himself on the map, and I would expect the Bears to put some points up in that game.
Greg from the Breaking It Downs podcast, thank you for filling in for Bucks McGee in a little bit of a messy post Hurricane Milton situation. So take us off air, sir, with your final thoughts heading into Week 6.
My final thoughts would be that the New York Giants may shock the world and actually win on Sunday night and make this a respectable season. And that's what I'm going to go with. And if I'm wrong, then I'll be very angry. But I do think they have a legit shot. I'm not kidding. I think that D-line and Dexter Lawrence is becoming a full-out star. I think he's going to do some things.